Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Becky Siekmeyer, and I am the Program Director for the SciTechsperience Internship Program at MHTA. And I'm here today with my colleague, Piper Cleveland, who is the Marketing and Communications Specialist for SciTechsperience. Today, we're going to talk about how to host a successful internship for you and your student. This is a really important topic because when an internship is done well, it provides a phenomenal experience for both parties. For students, it's about getting hands-on training, doing meaningful work in their field, the kind of experience that looks great on a resume and will help them get a job after college, maybe even at the company where they do their internship. Employers get fresh perspectives, extra help at an affordable cost, and a look at future talent for their company. On the other hand, when internships don't go well, both students and employers are left feeling frustrated and disenchanted. Our goal today is to share ideas on how to make the internship experience a positive one for the employer and the student. As I mentioned, today's webinar is hosted by the SciTechsperience Internship Program. SciTechsperience connects small Minnesota businesses to college STEM majors for paid internships. This is a free, state-funded program run by the Minnesota High Tech Association. The state funding provides employers with a reimbursement of 50% of their interns' wages. The reimbursement is worth up to $2,500. The program is free, the paperwork is minimal, and companies make the hiring decisions. SciTechsperience has placed more than 1,350 students in STEM internships since the pilot began in 2012. As of today, we have about 250 wage matches remaining for 2019, so it's not too late to get started with your internship. You can learn more about the program and enroll at scitechmn.org. We'll also provide full contact information at the end of this presentation. Today, we'll be talking with representatives of 3 companies that use SciTechsperience to hear how they approach internships. Our guests today are Joanna LaBresh, President of Kingfisher Biotech, Eddie Glenn, Software Developer at Software for Good, and Darrin Edelman, Founder and Chief Technology Officer at Token of Trust. Thanks to all of you so much for joining us today. Let's take a minute or two to have each of you give us the elevator pitch of what your company does and the kind of interns you hire, like what kinds of majors. Joanna, let's start with you.
Hi, Becky. Thanks for inviting me. Kingfisher Biotech is about 10 years old, and we are looking for students with the majors in biochemistry, biology, chemistry, and they get a broad experience with us. We do a lot of not only protein expression work, but protein purification, also some molecular biology as in PCR genes from cDNA, or even designing genes and optimizing codons. So, you know, everything from A to Z in the biology field.
Awesome. Eddie?
Hi, this is Eddie. At Software for Good, we build software including web applications and mobile applications for all different types of companies and organizations. And we love working with opportunities that incorporate just an interesting social purpose. It makes our work more meaningful. And in terms of interns, we primarily look at computer science majors. We are open to really any STEM major. We have employed math majors and mechanical engineering majors, but the computer science offers a natural application, you know, for the students of what we're doing.
Awesome. And Darrin?
Thanks for having us, Becky. So first, Token of Trust is we provide software and a platform to help verify that people are who they say they are when we're dealing with them online. So when our clients need to figure out who is it that they're dealing with, they can use Token of Trust to help them figure that out. As for the interns that we tend to hire, again, similar to what Eddie was saying, we are open to pretty much any STEM related field. Lots of people these days are using computers, and some of the things that we need to do are, there's just basically more work than we can cover in any given day. And so we can opportunistically look at the things that we've got, and if we find a really great candidate, we can find work for them. That said, computer science is the most natural. followed by, if there's a design related technical major as well. Those are, I would say, the two best fits for us. So hopefully that helps.
Cool. All right. Thanks for sharing that. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today. Kind of 5 basic things. We're going to talk about how to get off on the right foot from day one, how to determine appropriate projects for interns. We'll talk about two-way feedback and why that's important, what to do when mistakes are made, and we'll provide some resources for setting up a top-notch internship at your company. All right, and before we get into that and into our questions, we're going to take a poll of our audience to see where people are at in the internship journey at their company. So you've got 3 options here. The question is, does your company have an internship program? Your options are yes, no, or it's in the works. So we'll keep the poll open for just a few seconds. So go ahead and respond now. And Piper's going to be monitoring that for us. All right, we'll leave it open a little bit longer. Okay, it looks like we've got some pretty good response rate. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll, and Piper, let's share the results. All right, it looks like a lot of people do have an internship program. A few are at the beginning of the journey or don't have one yet, but hopefully they will soon. All right, very good. Thanks for sharing that. All right, so Joanna, Eddie, and Darrin, you've all hired interns through SciTechsperience. So let's talk a little bit about your decision to hire interns. What benefit do they provide to your company?
I can start. This is Eddie again. So one of the strategies that Software for Good uses in order to try to make our community better is working with nonprofits and organizations that might not be able to afford top flight software engineering. So the internship program actually allows us to offer these services at a more affordable price for some. And so, right off the bat, as was mentioned earlier in one of the slides, there's just more affordable work that the interns can offer. But I think beyond that, the senior staff and the office just love being around the interns. They bring a lot of energy and perspective and makes the work more fun for everybody.
Cool. This is Joanna. Well, our real reason for interns is because I really want to give students a chance to experience science in a real setting. Most of us go to lab classes and we think we know what we're about to do in our future, and it's not even close. So we always have a student every year, whether, we love the interns, and we also hire other students just to start at the dishwashing level and learn their way up. So it's really about really seeing what it's like when you graduate and what you might be doing.
Yeah, so I guess this is Darrin. I will offer a personal perspective and then a professional business perspective. I think that when I did an internship, I really figured out what it is I wanted to do. So I think that's just a really incredible experience, and that if you have the opportunity, it's something that you as a student should do before you find yourself in a job that you don't like. And in software, there are so many different types of work that you can be doing that it just makes sense to try to get in there and figure out exactly which bit of work you're most interested in. So that's my personal perspective, is that it's something that I enjoyed, and I felt very privileged to have that opportunity, and it's good to be able to offer that to students as well. So now Token of Trust is interested in internships because we have, as I mentioned before, more work than we can possibly do. That said, I will say that because of the learning curve related to interns, it's not always clear that we're going to come out necessarily ahead from a value perspective, but there's more to it than that. So the energy that students bring in, or an intern brings in to the organization, and a different perspective is often, it sort of shines light in areas that we can improve. Especially as a small company, it's easy to get the blinders on and feel that we've got certain things covered. But ultimately, our success is going to depend upon our ability to grow, and bringing somebody in that can show us earlier than later that our ability to grow is, lacking in some area because they can't get up to speed or don't understand something, even if they're not contributing to the level that they might want. We find, that we have some improvements that we can make, and that's helpful regardless of the work that's done.
Cool. How many of you bring in more than one intern at a time?
I just do one. We're a small company.
One. Eddie?
At Software for Good, we do bring in multiple interns. We've had at least 2, which each like cohort a round of interns. And we strongly prefer, we actually find the more the better because of how much they can learn from each other. It's hard to qualify and quantify all the time that goes into mentoring sometimes, but we get the general impression that it actually just proves to be more efficient when the interns can support each other, bounce questions off of each other before they have to come to the more senior leadership at the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at Token of Trust, we've done one intern at a time, and I think we're going to change that up. I mean, in other organizations, I've had groups of 5 interns, and there's definitely that support network and even a camaraderie that develops between the interns, and they can kind of troubleshoot issues and unblock themselves much better with a group than they can individually. So that's something that we're looking at this year to add to our program.
Cool. And just as a side note, I thought I'd add, you can hire up to 10 interns per program year through SciTechsperience.
We might not make it to 10.
But you could if you wanted to.
For.
Yes, exactly. All right. Those are great points. So let's talk about getting ready for the intern. There's probably no better way to dampen an intern's enthusiasm on their first day than to realize the company is not ready for you. So the signs of not being prepared are pretty easy to spot. Your work area isn't set up. No one has time to train you in on where to find things, or worse, the people in charge of you didn't even know you were coming. I've actually heard some stories of this happening, not in SciTechsperience, but other people who've had internships, which I can't imagine anything worse. Avoiding these scenarios really isn't difficult, but it does require a little advanced planning. So in doing some research before today's webinar, I found a few other tips on important things to have in place on or before an intern's first day. So of course, having their workspace set up, you want to have the computer and login information, any software that they need is going to be installed, maybe a phone list of others they'll be working with, and talk to them about how they're going to get paid, the payroll paperwork. Introduce the student to key teammates and company leadership. You'll want to give them a tour of your office and facility, make sure they know where the bathroom is, maybe the kitchen, whatever. Do they need to track their time? And if so, review time tracking systems and client billing if this is needed. And review their work schedule. What time should they arrive? How do breaks work? How long is lunch? What time should they be done each day? If your company has policies on dress code and personal use of phones, social media, and the internet, be sure to set these expectations up front as well. And you'll want to definitely provide an overview of what your company does and how the interns fit into the bigger picture. So I'd like to ask you guys, how do you help interns understand how they fit into the picture, the big picture at your companies?
Well, this is Darrin. I can start this one. I guess what I would say is that what we try to do is make sure that, in advance of the intern coming in, certainly all of the things that are in this list, I'll just assume that that's done. But we try to make sure that there's one project that the intern has that they can fall back on that's pretty static. It's pretty well defined. It's got guardrails. There are some advanced pieces of the project perhaps, but they might be optional. It's not necessarily expected that an intern would get to all of those things. And then in terms of management of their day, that's actually pretty easy for us. We operate on Scrum and Agile, as a lot of software organizations do. So we have an early morning meeting, typically, same time every day, and it's just to cover what you've done since the last meeting, what what's on the docket for the day, and whether you have any blockers. So, so for us, that's pretty easy. Of course, for that first day, you can expect that you'll probably go out to lunch and that kind of thing as well, and meet everybody and so on. But fundamentally, that's kind of how we set the stage. So it's pretty simple for us. We're still a pretty small organization, so it's not that hard. You meet everybody pretty quickly, and it's easy to reach everybody.
Nice.
Well, I decided to take it a step further sometimes, and before their first day, I actually wrote them a letter, and they had to write me back, and I asked them questions like, if you could have a superpower, what would it be? Who do you look up to? And I also wrote like tidbits about each employee, and then when we had lunch, they had to guess what employee it was, and it really brought up a lot of ice-breaking situations, because we could have a lot of fun with it, because I literally gave them 10 questions that, who do you most aspire to be like? Who do you, why were you dumb enough to go into science, because it doesn't pay well? And, just fun things. And it really broke the ice. And we'll keep doing that, because you just, otherwise you start with no personal history, and it's just so much fun, to laugh at each other's doofiness and, go from there. But lunch, of course, and we outline all of our projects, and they know that they're going to have the 4th of July week off, and all those things are in the letter, so that they walk in the door knowing what to expect.
Oh, that's great.
I certainly agree with everything that's been said. And I would especially want to highlight what was really just described, I think, speaks to some of the emotional preparation that we can also do, recognizing that at Software for Good, we hire, very skilled, experienced, intelligent young people, and they still get really nervous when they are next to, someone who's more senior, has 20 years of experience or something like that. So I find that, it's not enough for me to say to the intern, oh, you can ask someone else, at the organization, so-and-so has expertise in this. Like, I find I have to, at least the first time, explain to them, it's okay to talk to them while they're working. It's okay to interrupt them, at these certain times. I'm going to walk you over and introduce you right now. It's another approach to breaking the ice. Just recognizing that these interns will be nervous at least sometimes, and we can be prepared to work through that.
Yeah, those are all really good points. I'm curious what your thoughts are around, if you have anything else to add on best practices for, small businesses, in terms of having things in place when an intern arrives, other than what we've already talked about. I think you said you said you take people out to lunch, Darrin.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do we.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do we.
Same kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty standard, I think.
A little breaking bread helps to get everybody comfortable.
Yeah, I think so too. Anything else you want to add to best practices, or maybe if you've worked in a larger company, maybe are there any things that small companies have an advantage over in doing at the beginning that big companies maybe?
I guess I'm going to say a disadvantage that a small company
Okay.
has, and just a cautionary note. When you're a part of a larger company, everybody's kind of got their track and, maybe the task or the specific job that they're supposed to do, job function. In a smaller company, in particular, a smaller company that might be cash strapped or something like that, sometimes there's just not enough people to get everything done. So on the one hand, it's great to have a program like MHTA that helps to supplement, that. And, on the other hand, you need to make sure that you're prepared for that intern on that first day. Otherwise, it's just going to add to your workload. It's not going to actually help you nor the intern. And so, for us, actually, you were talking about sending things out early to the intern. We define the project, at least that sort of steady state project, in advance. Make sure it's aligned with, enough of our business goals that we feel like it's going to move things forward, because we actually want the intern to have something that they can show off and point to at the end of the internship.
Yes.
But we try to send that out to them in advance, so they kind of get a feeling of what they're going to work on. So, I think things like that are important, especially for the smaller company, because you're not going to be able to necessarily peel out extra time to do that. Whereas in a larger company, we had more ability, more resources to be able to pull together if something wasn't quite right. We could even readjust entirely what the intern was going to work on. Small company, I feel like we might struggle to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, ours are very defined what they're going to do that summer with, some road changes available, but it's, I've mapped out what I think is going to be a successful, 12-week program.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, for sure. Let's get into kind of talking about this work plan a little bit more. So Darrin, you talked about kind of having a project set aside that the intern kind of can do along the way, and then they have other things that come up, but they always have kind of that one static thing that they're kind of responsible for. Would you guys have something kind of similar?
In science, well, it's not quite a project. We have a list of skills that we think somebody at that level should be able to learn and master by the end of the summer. And then we have a few extras in case they are a fast learner and catch on quickly. So, and then how those fit in the big picture. And, for us, we're a small company, so, our interns actually are responsible for the purification of proteins that we now sell. So, I mean, they do get the full-blown small company experience.
So at Software for Good, every internship cohort has its own project, to some extent at least. And that means over the course of a 12-week program, interns are getting introduced to a new client and a new project, to some extent even a new programming language or framework, and building that out. So the work plan, really we try to fit it into Software for Good's overall practices as much as possible. And we find this actually harkens back to the questions about just how do you get started, how do you plan? We found it's really important to identify the different aspects of our work. There is the programming, the nitty gritty, which people would probably presume that we do, but also the details around like project management and client communication. To some extent, each of these pieces have to be broken down into like learning modules during that first week, and present it to them in a way that's palatable to someone who's new to all of it. And then they just ramp up on it throughout the whole 12 weeks, that they're able to just do more and more of those types of things automatically, so to speak.
How do you know what level of difficulty an intern is capable of? Can you kind of guess that by like what year they are in school? Like you kind of know what coursework they've had, or does it really vary by the individual?
So varies by the individual. I mean, we had 3 juniors last year applying for the same internship, and one of them actually had a website that showed their research.
Wow.
And the other one just wanted to learn how to pipette, which you need to know before you come to our lab.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is Darrin. It definitely varies, but what we try to do is develop, we generally actually have multiple projects that we know that need to get done, and we try to match those to the background of the intern that we bring in. There are required bits for that project, and then there are sort of the optional bits. And typically we wouldn't expect anybody to get through every optional piece that might be a part of a project. So that's kind of where, some things might be a little more difficult, but we kind of expect the intern to tackle that anyway. In other words, like we might do hand holding, we might do pair programming, some of that kind of thing, but we have to push through certain required bits. And some students catch on really fast and just, blow through everything. And then, then they're working on the optional things. And some of the optional things are just not very well defined. So then they have to get into the whole specking side of it, which is a whole other aspect, which is great for them to learn too. So we've never seen anybody get through everything, but there are some students that have gotten through a ton of stuff.
Cool. I just want to remind people that are listening to go ahead and submit questions using the questions box in the control panel too. in terms of like setting goals and milestones, like Darrin, you talked a little bit about the Scrum meetings and the Agile process. Joanna or Eddie, do you guys have anything to add in terms of like kind of how you schedule that out, or do you just kind of have kind of a broad idea and you just adjust as you're going?
So this is Eddie. At Software for Good, since we have a client project that's unique to each intern cohort, it's especially important for us to be able to deliver this client project at the end of it. So we employed the same type of agile week-to-week iteration of completion of work that is used at the rest of the company. And we find that the way we approach, I guess, some of the varying difficulty or capacity of the interns is we start, assuming I'm going to be there the whole way. I'll sit right next to them, pair programming, and then me and the other staff at Software for Good just pull back as soon as possible. So, we kind of start things off on the right foot and keep a close eye to make sure the progress is being made, because we just have to deliver to clients at the end of it, just like our company always wants to do.
Cool. Looks like we got a couple questions from the audience. So Piper, why don't you let us know what those are?
So this first question comes from Michael Ruby. He's asking, do you offer programs for graduate level talent? And do you modify your program versus undergrad?
Okay, so that's a question of your internships for graduate level versus undergraduate level interns, and how do you vary the work?
Yeah, I mean, so this is Darrin from Token of Trust. We've had interns from both levels. And I guess what I would say is, obviously as a graduate, typically you're going to get paid a bit more. And you're expected to do a bit more. In terms of the types of work, there really are pretty similar types of work. But we might expect that, something that we were concerned to assign an undergrad, we might not have the same level of concern with a graduate student. And we would expect more out of that graduate student as well. But, that also means you get more opportunity to learn and really sink your teeth in. So, yeah, I think most of our projects allow for a pretty broad set of skills. So that's how we handle it.
We're not set up for graduate level internships. I feel that would be beyond our ability to mentor at this point.
Okay, Eddie?
So we do have, well, we have not had a graduate student yet, but we certainly could. I think that what I was speaking about before, the way we approach it is in the beginning, I'm pair programming with the interns and just making sure the work gets done. And frankly, the more skilled ones, or when we recognize the intern is ready to take off on their own, that's great. That means I get to back up sooner. And my role might shift from lead developer into something more like project manager, or maybe something even more distant. That definitely has happened. So yeah, there has to be like this dynamic assessment right from the beginning. And the more skilled, the better. It's better for everyone. And the intern is just allowed to take on a lot more responsibility sooner.
Yeah, I think this is where it's really important for the company to build in recognition that not all interns are created equally. Some have strengths in certain areas and some have strengths in other areas. And so you need to be prepared to give them the appropriate level of guidance depending upon what their skill set is. So you can't just have a rule book and stick to the rules. It's just not going to work.
Right. And we have a second question, Piper?
Yes, 2 questions from Adna Olia. They're asking, do you have to teach the programming language to the interns, or do most of the interns already know the basics of programming? And then they have a follow-up question that asks, how do you define the appropriate level of difficulty?
All right, so the question for those of you who maybe didn't hear that is around programming languages, and do Eddie and Darrin need to teach those languages? And then the second one was? How do you define the appropriate level of difficulty? How to define the appropriate level of difficulty of, I assume, programming projects. Yeah. So, Eddie?
Yeah, I can start. So we do not hire for experience in a certain programming language with our interns. Rather, when screening, when doing technical interviews, we just look for their experience more generally with programming. And to some extent, do they have any projects that they're particularly proud of, where it's clear that they took it seriously, they learned quickly? And based on that, there are software engineering principles that are generic enough that if they're bringing those to the table, we can ramp them up quickly. The varying difficulty comes up more in the implementation. What are the features that are actually being built out in a given application? And then it becomes the responsibility of Software for Good staff, and mostly myself, to just gauge that appropriately. Within an application, we can always break a feature down into smaller pieces to make them, severable for an intern to really take it from beginning to end. And it's not an easy thing necessarily. It's kind of a subtle skill that we have to develop over time. But it is something that we just push ourselves to do, to identify the piece of work that an intern can complete successfully, depending on the capacities of the intern.
Cool. Any other questions, Piper? Okay. All right. Well, let's move on then. Oops. Hang on 1 second. Move on to the check-ins and progress. And we've talked a lot about sort of the Agile and Scrum process. But as you guys know, people at all stages of their career like to know how they're doing. So besides those kind of formal check-ins, do you do other check-ins like one-on-ones, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly? Do you have some sort of check-in practice?
I guess I'd back away from calling the Scrum stuff formal, because it's actually really quite informal. But a lot of times what that results in is I'm stuck, and that will result in, like, literally on a daily basis, you get to sort of say, and of course you have to be willing to, as a student, say I'm stuck. So that's one of the obstacles. But that would result in a one-on-one follow-up after the Scrum. It's not typically handled in the group unless it's appropriate to handle it in the group. But I'd say that sort of cadence on a daily basis really keeps us out of trouble for the most part. You don't find out like 6 weeks later or whatever that, things are off the rails. It's same day generally.
That's for us too. It's a daily conversation.
Yeah.
How'd your day go? What's your day to look like? What were your hiccups? What do you wish you had done slightly differently? It's a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. We have the same experience at Software for Good.
Okay. How do you encourage two-way feedback? Usually interns are expecting you to provide feedback to them. How do you encourage them to give feedback to you about maybe their experience at your company or anything that's going on? It's too hot, it's too cold, my neighbor is, whatever.
I hold them down and force them to tell me.
Nice.
But they're going to tell you. It's a casual conversation that you're having every day, and you ask them, how did it go for you today? I asked last year's, because in her things you knew she was close to her mother. I said, when you got home yesterday, when you called your mother, what'd you tell her about your day? Oh my God, I love it. You hope that's what they say.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I guess I would say that sometimes it's important to share that, look, in software, we have to be used to people cataloging all of our mistakes, prioritizing them, and then telling us which ones need to be fixed because you screwed up. I mean, that's just like from
just
early
the way
days
it
of
is.
software, that's the way it is. Like it's almost all about the mistakes that are made. Ideally, we're putting into practice great software engineering practices, but especially early on, you make mistakes. So if things aren't moving along after a couple days with the Scrum, you can kind of sense that maybe somebody's stuck, and then you can have that conversation about, where are things. And by the way, not everybody, don't be shy about these things. There's an appropriate amount of time to wait, and you're welcome to bring things up. So I guess that's what I would say. But the problem is all interns really want to look awesome, and
Right.
So
nobody wants to show that
every
they're-
moment.
Yeah, right.
But there are learning moments too. So
Yeah. So how do you turn those when they make a mistake? How do you turn that into a teachable moment?
you laugh first
And then share mine.
and then share, right? We've all screwed up and
You think you screwed up there. Well, let me share this.
we have a really funny, because everybody makes mistakes. And so we have the establish blame early. So you walk in the door, today everything that goes wrong is Yvonne's fault. And so, one day it was Julie's fault. One day it's my, and then we all laugh about it and talk about the things that go wrong. And it's, all you can do is laugh and learn.
Yeah, this is Eddie. I would agree with all of that. I think attitude has a lot to do with it. You could ask an intern, what were you thinking? Or you could ask an intern, oh, what were you thinking? Like, to some extent, like, that question of tone can be accusatory, or it can really be genuine, like, there definitely have been many times that an intern implements a feature or solution in a way that I never would have thought of. And I love learning from that. I love learning from just the way that another person approaches a problem.
Yeah, sometimes that's the best thing that ever happened.
I think it's funny is when how they interpret what you think you've told them, and they interpret back and you go, man, that wasn't what I was thinking at all, but now I'm learning how to teach, and I'm learning. And in biology, we then explain what they're doing and how it fits, and then we have to learn how to explain it. And sometimes you have to think twice. Oh, yeah, that doesn't necessarily make the most sense, but you make it fun.
Yeah, I agree. Those are great insights. Let's take a minute to launch our second poll. Besides getting hands-on experience in their field, what are some ways that you've added value to what the intern is learning? So go ahead and check any boxes that apply. Are you helping them with networking, maybe exposure to other functions in the company, introducing your intern to your vendors or clients? Maybe you've taken them to an industry function or trade show or something else. So we'll leave the poll open for a few seconds while you share your results. And while we're waiting, Joanna, Eddie, and Darrin, do any of these things resonate with you? What are some bonus activities that you guys do at your company?
Yeah, we do all of these. I guess we haven't really brought interns to trade shows. The only trade show we've ever gone to is in Dublin, so that would have been pretty awesome. But,
wow, yeah, wouldn't that be a great trip?
Yeah, that would have been sweet. But yeah, and we've done work also with McAllister and the McMaster program, and for those students, we learned that getting them involved a little bit in the business and sort of what's happening from a business perspective is important, and in particular in software, communication and understanding the value of what you're producing for somebody is incredibly important. It's that whole, like, one software engineer might be worth 10x what another is, and part of that is understanding what you're delivering. So that's another one of the things. So talking to the exposure to other functions of the company, we think that that's incredibly important. But also the networking opportunities and things like that. We're heavily involved in the entrepreneurial community here in the Twin Cities, so we offer those opportunities as well if students want to get involved.
You've got the brown bag.
Yeah, I'm the organizer of Founders Brown Bag here in the Twin Cities, and we have a lot of startup founders and things like that, and we do regular monthly roundtables to talk about our biggest challenges. We've considered opening up the roundtable even for students to listen in so they can get the sense of, like, well, what are the biggest challenges that entrepreneurs have? But we haven't yet pulled the trigger on that. So stay tuned.
Cool.
One thing that could be helpful to add is I found that we definitely at least try to do all of these things, and it is very valuable to actually schedule them to be, I don't want to say like formal about it, but for example, over the course of 12 weeks we're asking interns to build a new feature for a client. At the end of those 12 weeks we might realize we forgot to expose them to other functions of the company. Like a real practical example is the interns have every cohort of interns has built out some type of web application, but Software for Good also does mobile applications. So we would love to have them actually sit down, maybe pair program with, our mobile developers. If we don't put that on the calendar, like, it's never going to happen. So just, I guess this is another just aspect of planning ahead.
We're in an incubator, so there's lots of companies there, and there's, the lunchtime features, and all of our interns or students are invited to attend any of those lunch and learns, they're called, or any other seminar or any other thing that's in the building.
Oh, that's cool. All right, Piper, I imagine we have results from the poll, and looking to see, it looks like people networking and exposing the students to other parts of the company are the two biggest features. So awesome, that's great. All right, thanks everybody for sharing that. Let's talk, whoops, I went the wrong way. There we go. At the end of the internship, some things need to happen generally, right? So walk us through the kinds of activities that companies should be thinking about on the intern's last day or the last couple days. So a couple of things to think about, like, do your interns give a presentation on their projects? How do they hand off their work? Do you do an exit interview? And if you haven't decided to hire the intern full-time at the end of the internship, do you stay in touch, and how do you do that? So you can jump in on any of those.
Ours are still stay part-time because, during the summer they can be full-time, but they actually get a little bit of taste of having some cash in their pockets. And so they love to work weekends. And so for me, that was the biggest part, is to make sure that the intern is capable of independent work at some level so that you can assign them weekend projects that are just small projects that they can finish over 2 days. And so far, so good, knock on wood.
So I'm sorry, that was for staying in touch with the interns after the program?
Oh, yeah, we have,
Gotcha.
our
Okay.
relationships haven't ended, so I
Okay, yeah,
can't
no, that
speak
makes
to
perfect sense.
ending it.
That makes perfect sense. So, I mean, for us, we aim for the presentation is often a really great thing for the intern, because a lot of interns aren't used to giving the presentation towards the end. It's also a great motivation to sort of finish things up. So we've done this to varying degrees of success, but that combined with an iterative process where we try to make sure that the product is always shippable usually means that things wrap up pretty nicely and can be handed off. So, and then we currently aren't using interns as a mechanism for full-time hires. That's just purely like budgetary at this point for us, but we'd love to be in a position to do that. I've done that to great success in the past. So I hope to be able to do that again.
Awesome. Eddie, anything you want to add? Well, I know your interns give presentations because we've actually come to some of them. And those are always really neat.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of emphasizing, we have like a PowerPoint style presentation, at the end of every cohort of interns. And I feel like it always goes really great. It just kind of allows a sense of closure for each group. And I think there aren't many times that the interns get to really like sit face to face with like the whole company, like the whole company is invited. So yeah, I think that just allows a really positive experience, closure, and also, some feel good, laughs that the whole group can share.
I think doing those presentations, because we've actually been invited to a few different ones, and they vary from being more of like a casual presentation to being like, you can tell that they spent a good amount of time putting these presentations together. And I think it really helps the interns sort of think back to where they started and where they ended, and kind of document what they learned in between, because it's real easy, I think, to leave an internship and go on to do the next thing, and it doesn't take long, and you sort of forget what you worked on because you've moved on to other things. And I think, putting that presentation together almost helps you write the bullet points for your resume, because it kind of helps you summarize.
I think it's a great point. And a 12-week internship that flies by. I mean, it's
Yeah.
over instantly. So
Right, yep, definitely. All right, well, let's kind of recap here the best practices, because we've covered a lot of ground today. So some of the things we've talked about is really the importance of being prepared on day one, providing that overview of what your company does and where the intern's work fits into the bigger picture, having meaningful projects ready in advance, and ideally one that they can do on their own, especially when there's downtime. Setting goals or milestones, however that works into your business model, having those regular status checks, and really encouraging that two-way feedback, encouraging questions, and making sure people feel comfortable in asking questions, and helping your interns feel like they belong. I think, you don't want to just stick them over in a corner and go, here's your assignment, and, come back and I'll see you next week or whatever. So belonging is a big piece of it. Those value-added opportunities are really big, the networking, exposure to other functions in the company. And I don't know if we really talked about this, but the exit interview, I think, is also important. It's good for both sides to learn. And we talked about the presentations at the end, that's a really good thing to do, and to really assess each intern based on their abilities and adjust as you go. Is there anything else that you guys would add that I forgot?
No, it's a very personal experience for the intern, so it's important to recognize them as the individual that they are and tailor it to them as much as you can that works for the company.
Eddie and Darrin, anything?
and I think to remember that this could actually influence the path that the intern takes, career-wise, and so could really have a huge impact on their lives.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories about doing site visits is I was up in Duluth, actually. We were talking about Joanna and Eddie both being from Duluth. I was at a company in Duluth, and I was talking with the interns about their experience and asked them how the internship was going to kind of influence their path forward. And the first guy was like, oh, this is great. This is exactly what I want to do. I'm off into grad school, and I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I turned to look at the other guy, and he had this total deer in the headlights look. Like, I wish you hadn't asked me that question. And he said, well, I've discovered that this is not really exactly what I want to do. Like, I'm going to stay in this major, but I'm going to shift my focus. And I said, aren't you glad you learned that now while you're still in school and you can kind of switch your focus in your classes and stuff? If you wait till, like you said earlier, Darrin, if you wait till after you're out of college and on the job and then go, wow, I don't like this, that's
Yeah,
kind of,
those are both ideal outcomes. You either learn that this is exactly what you want to do, or this is not what I want to do at all.
yes.
Time well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to a couple of resources that we have on our webpage, scitechmn.org. There's Employer's Guidebook to Developing a Successful Internship, and another document called Making Internships Work. And there's also another resource I found called Internships, the Basics, and that's on internships.com in their employer resources area. We also have a couple other recordings on our blog, and one of them is about writing job descriptions, how to maximize your job descriptions to compete for great talent, and the other one is on interviewing interns, how to find a great fit for both of you. And before we move on, it looks like we've got at least one more question.
This comes from Michelle Herman. She wants to know, how do you handle negative feedback if the intern wasn't happy with their experience?
Oh, good question. Yeah. How do you handle negative experience if the intern wasn't happy with the experience?
Well, if you just find out at the very end you've done something wrong the whole 12 weeks, let's just put it that way. There is some point at some check-in, you should have found that out, and you should offer them an out if it's not what they want, or ask them, how can we adjust to make this something that you will get something out of?
Yeah, the reason that we do the daily check-ins and, sort of, ear to the ground that, something might not be right is so that we can tune and make some adjustments to the internship. If it doesn't come up to the end, there's really not much that you can do other than potentially take that feedback for the next intern. If you happen to be that intern, I think do yourself a favor and don't hold back. You got to let us know early. I know that you don't want to have a negative experience in your internship and you might worry about reprisals, but we all understand that there's no such thing as perfection as we're building our companies. So we're very interested to understand what we could be doing to make a more positive experience for everybody that's working in the company.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think on my end, it has a lot to do with the recognition that, our company isn't perfect. If anything, the same way that we're iterating to improve software and being agile to how that needs to grow, our company needs to be agile in that same way. And that requires, checking in every day, multiple times a day with each of the interns to make sure everything's going smoothly for everyone.
Yeah, that's great. I think exit interviews are, like you said, that's kind of too late in the game to be hearing about it for the first time. But making sure that people feel comfortable in sharing feedback both ways and kind of establishing that culture early on is important. And then in the exit interview to, ask the question, for the next time we do an internship, what would you do differently? Would be another way to kind of get at that. All right. Well, that's really, that's all we have for content today. So Joanna, Eddie, and Darrin, thanks so much for joining us. It's been really great to hear your insights. Oh, Piper's raising her hand. Looks like we got another question.
And this question actually segues great into the end.
Okay.
Anna Olia wants to know, how do you get started with your organization?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. Yes, that is a great segue. The contact information for me is on the screen now. You can learn just about anything you want to know on your own on our website, which is scitechmn.org. The buttons to get to the enrollment forms for students and employers is right there on the home page. The student page and the employer page both have a lot of information as well. But feel free to just give me a call or send me an email with any questions, and I'd be happy to walk you through how everything works. So I invite all of you small businesses out there to use SciTechsperience to find your next intern. As I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of wage matches remaining for this year. So now's a really good time. We've got interns pouring in every day, candidates that are registering. Our student outreach coordinator is actually having trouble keeping up with all the applications. So this is a really great time to get started. You can also follow us on Twitter at SciTechMN and check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn. We're all over the place on social media. So, all right, with that, I guess that's about it. Thanks so much for joining us and have a great day.